Jersey. So yeah, it's been technically, Larry, it's day 3.
Day 3?
Third day, it's either the third or fourth day without symptoms. I'm still testing moderate, slightly positive. There's a thin line. But it basically, this means I'm into the 5-day count because I can still test positive, believe it or not, for up to 90 days.
Well, are you infectious at this point?
After 5 days, no. Technically, I may not be now, but they say wait 5 days with no symptoms.
Okay, he's probably going to be really glad.
Okay. Do you have to ask?
A little shot of penicillin will clear that right up for you, Chris.
No, it won't.
Well, Chris, you want me to just give a summary on where we stand with different projects?
I think that would probably be wise.
Okay, well, this is actually going to be in the product news for the October Naval Sit Rep. So, yeah, basically the October Naval Sit Rep is about ready to go in rough draft, and we're pushing hard to make sure that it does come out in the month of October. And it's got a lot of fun stuff in it. We're including the Swedish Navy, since guess what? They're going to be part of NATO now. And we've got some rule clarifications, a couple scenarios, Dawn of the Battleship, Fear God, Dreadnought, some book reviews, including the highly recommended Handbrake by Mariano Ciaroni and Alejandro. Chris, what was the other fellow's name? Last name? Alejandro. Sorry, can't remember.
Yeah, Handbrake's just Murano, isn't it?
Oh no, it's there's another guy.
There's another guy. He had that other guy's name that I can't pronounce. Is A.M. Amaralona or something like that.
Amaralona, that's right.
I can't. I just don't have it with me at the moment, so I can't pull it up and look at it.
Yeah, same thing. I've already put it in my bookshelf because the books I have on my desk, it gets a little much.
Oh yeah, I know.
In addition, Clear the Coast has gone through rough draft, and we're into smooth, and it's looking good. We've got the gorgeous cover picked out with some Canadian MTBs on the front. We should have that out later this year. Beyond that, we're still banging on Commonwealth navies, and unfortunately, it's a moving target because the Brits, keep building stuff and changing stuff, and so we're making mods to the drafts as we work on the drafts. But we'll get it done. That is the next annex book. After that comes Japan, and it'll be in the Navy series, but we'll have to call it Japan Self-Defense Forces because that's the way they refer to themselves.
Maritime Self-Defense Force.
Well, no, because we do air as well. Because we'll have the Air Self-Defense Force in there. Just like, I'm sorry, it's Russia's navies. Well, for the Navy's books, yeah, they're actually so big that we have to split them. And I should mention, Commonwealth navies will be 2 books. We got it all into one draft, and it was a really big book. So we are splitting it as we have done the other 2. Now there's one for ships and one for aircraft.
The problem is, Peter, once they get really big, the print-on-demand version gets really tough.
Yeah. The bindings, I mean, they will print up to 240 pages, but it really, the binding starts to lose it after about 128. So we we like to split them. It also keeps the cost down in case somebody doesn't want to buy the whole thing. We respect that. People got bucks. I mean, everything we do, and I should just for the record, everything we do goes through 3 formal drafts and maybe more. I mean, we get it assembled as a rough, and it goes out to a whole bunch of guys all over the world who review it, multiple eyes on the draft. They send me feedback. That gets folded in. Then it's a smooth. And at that point, it's supposed to be complete. We send it out. They check it again. And then it comes back to us. And at that point, it's in galley. And it gets one last pass, which takes about a week. And then we're ready to put it up on the board. The point is that there are literally thousands of details in these publications, and we really, really want to get as much of it right as possible. But we also depend and really welcome feedback from people who say, hey, this doesn't make sense, or hey, I found a typo. Because every time you send us a typo and we correct the master files, everybody after that gets a clean copy for free. So you're always dealing with the cleanest copy that's available, even to the designers. I'm sorry, long rant. Bye. I'm done.
Raise your hand. Um, well, there's a couple of things coming up that are going to probably turn into unofficial tests, beta tests, or is it gamma tests? I don't know. For Captain's Edition, we have I have an NROTC game I'm running in October, which I'm going to be using CRT tables that I'm putting together. And then Larry and I may have a couple of events, professional events that we might get hooked into. One is with Picatinny Arsenal. And if that's the case, we'll be using Captain's Edition, because we'll be dealing with people that really don't have a lot of detailed miniature skills, let alone wargaming skills. So we'll be doing a bit of that. It's being adjusted. We can't. I mean, you really can't go with the current values. You just can't. Harpoon 5 is so different from 3 that just turning it back out isn't going to work. Yeah. Yeah, H5 will be the basis, and we will abstract from there. A lot of the things like the 50-mile hexes, that's fine. In fact, that works out to our advantage, because it means over-the-horizon targeting takes place in the adjacent hex. So that makes it really simple from a geometric perspective or a graphical perspective. So that's going to be the same. We're going to start off with the same location, because we want to be true to the original Captain's Edition. But once we get this done, there's no reason why we can't go elsewhere. Well, actually, we've come down to a single game, so it's going to be a merge between the really buckwheat simple and a mid level. So we're just going to support one game that's a simplified hex-based version. But we'll try and keep it to the point that if people want to use 1/6000 counters, miniatures instead of counters, you can do that. But that just means we have to make the scale work. So, for example, one of the maneuvering issues that will change is instead of 45-degree turns, it's going to be 30, because that allows us to mimic then the hex base, hex corners. So that's what we're looking at, going with that. And the whole purpose is to try and preserve the feel. It's not going to be, detailed engagements, because that's the whole point of Captain's Edition, is to get away from all the details, fold them in as much as possible into the backdrop, so that the players don't have to worry about them. Oh, some people suggested the Pacific. I don't know. I guess some people think that's important. Yeah, a little South China Sea action, yeah. So that's going to be one. The other things we've been working on, nothing is really up there. Larry's still pounding away on High Tide, and I have not yet started to work on the Russian air defense modeling that I have, because I've been busy doing other things. But what that's going to do is we're going to have, for those scenarios where you're attacking the Kola, we will have, for the 1970s and 80s, the generations of air defense command and control structure that I've found online on a Russian website that talks about air defense, which will basically allow us to model the fact that you can saturate Soviet air defense.
Before, it was a situation where the nodal thing that we had set up in there works very well, but the Russians could salvo as many aircraft into a particular node as they had assets available. And no, you can't send everybody at once, because you don't have the command and control to handle it. And that's going to put a limiter on the Russians. It makes, it helps the US or NATO in an attack. And yeah, it's bad news for the Russians, but it is real world.
Yeah, Peter, when you look at the discussion on data links, and I use that term very loosely, there's a display in some of the like MiG-21s, MiG-23s, that's a bunch of dots in a compass rose. And what they do is the command and control center flash a dot, and the pilot steers towards it, which is, a little weird, but okay.
Well, it's definitely Gen 1. They're not getting range and bearing. They're not getting a raid count. They're just saying steer in this direction.
That's basically it. That's the whole. If you look at the whole purpose of ground control intercept, think of the fighter as a maneuvering SAM. They're not getting everything they need to know to intercept. They're just told where to go. No, we'll put a bunch of it into High Tide. So
well, for instance, the scenarios that I'm working on right now, which are based on Eric Grove's book about going into Battle of the Fjords. NATO had a plan to put the carriers in fjords where they'd be harder for Soviet aviation to target. Once there, they could use their air groups to strike targets in the Kola. And so you will have your carrier battle group in the fjord, and then you'll launch it, and it will have to go through the air defenses of the Kola before it gets to the intended target. And we sort of suggested you do that in the previous version of High Tide, but this time we're really going to integrate it into the scenario so that the player understands, the process.
The point here, Peter, is to not model in depth, but basically a design for effect type approach, where we tell you this generation can talk to these fighters, it can talk to these SAMs, because there are limitations. If you have, like, say, an older generation, you can talk to SA1s, SA2s, but you can't talk to SA5s. So, that allows the players to say, okay, the Russians are improving their defenses, but do all the Kola get updated at the same time? The answer is probably not. There would be a sequential mode radiating out of, like, Severomorsk or something like that. And so you could actually mimic competing air defenses. The newer one is backward compatible, but the older ones can't talk to the new systems. So, that can really give you a nuance for all the problems you'd have defending the Kola. And it also helps us to understand why the Soviets were so paranoid. I just think one scenario book's really pretty good. We're getting away from the convoy battles because the Russians have made it very clear that was not really where they were going. And as Larry and I started looking at their refueling assets and the fact that a backfire is borderline able to carry 2 missiles down into the Atlantic convoy areas, coming down with a single missile is pretty thin gruel for running through those air defenses.
That's true, especially after we've added the targeting, the rules about fire control solutions. I mean, you can before, when the Russians were firing missiles at a carrier battle group, at some point they got to pick their targets. Now there's an additional, you're aiming for the carrier, but are you going to get it? It might possibly hit another ship in the formation and not hit anybody at all.
And that really, Peter, that mentality really matches what we're seeing in Russian historical literature. Because as far as the Russians were concerned, the goal was to make the carrier go away. Whether you hit and sink the carrier or you take out enough escorts didn't matter. It was just make the carrier go away.
By the way, I remind everybody that we have there's an article that would appear first in the Naval War College Review. It's a free download on our website, and it's written from the Russian point of view and what they felt an attack on a carrier battle group in the Atlantic was going to represent, the difficulties, and basically they thought it would be a hell ride.
Yeah, I mean, if you do the math on some of the correlation of forces requirements, a single carrier battle group was going to require 3 regiments. That's 75 bloody aircraft, roughly. That's a lot. So, I mean, you go through it and they take into account reliability of the missiles. Did they target them well? Air defense is both outer, inner, and electronic warfare. I mean, they really looked at every step of the way, which was pretty impressive. And then they came back up with, you need this many missiles, and this requires you to have this many aircraft. Now, the nice thing is, as we go north, the Tu-22 M3s can carry 3 missiles, not 2, 3. And that makes things a little easier for them. Oh yeah, well, it's a supplement. You'll need the Harpoon 5 rules, but it's going to have a very different focus. Instead of convoys, which weren't the Russian emphasis, we're going to push to flank defense, which was the Russian emphasis. The Russian maritime strategy was very defensive. On the north, on the Kola Peninsula and in the Baltic. What you see is protecting the flank of the army is very much in evidence.
Also, the Russians viewed an approach from the Norwegian Sea into the Barents as by U.S. aircraft carriers as a possible nuclear strike, and so they were very, very focused on keeping the carriers outside that zone. And you know, again, the whole, if you look at their overall strategy, they really weren't trying to project power out into the Atlantic. The Bastion concept for their SSBNs, they weren't sending them out close to their targets. No, they were keeping them all corralled where they could be protected. And again, even the aircraft carriers that they were building, the Kievs, and then later on Kuznetsovs, they were designed to provide air superiority over the Barents and maybe into the edge of the Norwegian. They were not supposed to be projecting power out into the Atlantic.
Yeah, the aircraft carriers were viewed as the extension of PVO Strani to get fighters further out. And that was driven by our aircraft carriers, but also by the Tomahawk cruise missiles. They were absolutely paranoid of Tomahawk. I participated in several globals. Thank you. Two of them during the 80s. I actually was an assistant to one of the battle damage assessment guys. Who's giving it? Do you remember? That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Probably somebody I know. Yeah, yeah. It's a small incestuous group. What can I say? But yeah, I've been Larry and I are doing some things for the War College, particularly with the Chinese Maritime Studies Institute. But that's that's not Russia, and because we're going to be doing an input to their Chinese amphibious capabilities book. So we're doing that. By the way, Larry, I got the most almost useless guidance, but we got something.
Oh, getting anything out of those guys is
Yeah, I know.
I don't know whether it's the academic mindset or what, but it's all high level. Well, this is the thing. This is our goal. Okay, how are we going to do it?
I think it gets down to us deciding. And then there's a undersea warfare conference in April, and I'll be presenting on the on Chinese nuclear submarines. I have no idea. In the past, the Naval War College has been reluctant to do that, but it doesn't mean I can't, do my part later on. Oh, they were thinking about doing that from the Joint Maritime Operations Department, I think. Yeah, JMO. Yeah, been there, done that. Oh no, then that's going to be strategy and policy. I mean, I gotta tell you, strategy and policy was the most taxing course I have ever taken. You had easily 400 pages of reading a week. Easily. You could not keep up. You had to pick and choose. Well, I did the non-resident program. I think they call it the Fleet Seminar Series now. And it took me 3 years because the course was held for like 6 months. And then you would go between them. And it was run out of the Navy Yard. Professor Chadbourne was the head of it locally. And so you took several courses. Strategy and policy was one. That was the most onerous one. Joint maritime strategy was another one. And then national security decision making. It's weird because as a newly minted lieutenant commander, I was taking strategy and policy and found myself arguing nuclear policy with Stansfield Turner.
Did you win?
He admitted I had points, but that I didn't quite weigh everything, which is what you would expect the former president of the War College to say. But still, I mean, Stansfield Turner's like Rickover. They're legends within the naval community, and I guess I'm lucky to have met both. That was a bomb, and that was Air Force. So no, I did not. I am not Major Kong. That was the whole point of this. Come on, guys, wake up, drink your coffee. If you look at the upper right-hand corner, there's a little icon there with a hand. It says raise your hand, and then this allows you to clue Peter in that you want to say something. So that's where you go. It's the upper right-hand corner. It's right next to the little cog. Someone Jocko has raised his hand. Yeah, you need to unmute. Do you need to unmute him? Okay, all right. Yeah, you have to activate your mic there, guy. I don't know. Yeah, that will help. I was going to assume that.
I have a question for the group. I mean, if for the audience, what kind of games are you guys playing right now? What kind of scenarios have you last played?
Well, one of the nice things, Peter, about what Captain's Edition will do is that I'm taking a cue from Soviet naval planning, and if you assign like a maritime patrol aircraft to a hex, it's going to have a probability of detection. Mind you, it's going to be low unless you're queued. Unless it's a queued search, which is the way the Western countries did it with SOSUS, it's going to be low. Jocko has tried again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I had to mess around with my microphone a little bit. So what do we got? First question, just a little bit more on Captain's Edition. Is this a individual ship or task force type of game? Sounds like we're using hexes. I don't know much about the background there.
It's going to be based on individual ships, their capabilities, but we're going to be doing some of the disposition, if you will. So within a hex, you will have zones. If you've ever played SPI's Fast Carriers, it's the same sort of concept with the cap, is that if you're in a particular zone and a strike is coming from a particular direction, you may not be able to engage.
Yeah.
So that's one way we're going to limit. So it's not everybody shoots. It's, would be nice, but it usually doesn't work that way. And then you will have engagements based on range. Now, the nice thing is for most of the Captain's Edition, most people can only shoot into the adjacent hex. So that's kind of convenient. But still, I mean, that's pretty good. So you'll have an engagement rate within the hex. You'll have an engagement rate in adjacent hexes, which will be obviously lower. And then you'll, of course, have point defense. But point defense only works for the individual unit. And this way, we can demonstrate air defense, which is basically a numbers game when you get down to it. So we'll have most likely occurrences, and then I'm going to provide a, for the lack of a better term, a probability distribution function that you roll against to see how many hits you get. And it's not going to be a bell curve. It's going to be what's called a skewed bell curve based on something called Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution, which means you have more odds of having suboptimal performance and less odds of better than expected performance. And this will allow us to kind of factor in fog of war just into the combat system.
I look forward to that. Wow. Hey, in answer to Larry's question, yeah, I've done a little bit of simplot, like basic stuff. I think I did a couple things out of SITREP where I plotted stuff out in simplot and ran through a couple of small scenarios. A lot of fun, enjoying the system. Hard to find players, of course.
Yeah.
And then last but not least, I just wanted to ask you guys what your thoughts are regarding the change in how the Marines are approaching the situation in the Pacific. Their change in doctrine, and what are your thoughts in that direction?
My thoughts are mixed. I like the idea of giving them some coastal strike capability. This is new for them. Usually in the past, it was the Army. But this light amphibious warfare vessel, to quote my friend, it's the LCS of the amphib world and should be avoided.
Agreed.
It can't defend itself worth a diddly. And just because you got more platforms, it just means that more missiles means you lose the same number of people because your defenses are nowhere near as well as your standard ARG. I understand what they're trying to do. I just think they're being idiots. My personal opinion.
It just seems like we're living in a world where people want to get creative, and they don't understand that getting creative has its downside too. You kind of need mass at times where.
Well, yeah, they're forgetting the whole concept of the concept of war. Unity of effort, mass, that sort of thing. The thing is they're trying to. It's like LCS and the DDG 1000. What does transformational mean? That was a design goal. Both of those ships are unmitigated failures.
Indeed.
So that kind of tells me that if you're going to try to do this out of the box thing, maybe you should define the box first.
You think? Yeah. Good point. Good point. I agree.
So let me ask you guys a question. How many of you really seriously want to play with ASW?
If I'm the sub.
Now, you do know that ASW means awfully slow warfare, right? Peter, here's a suggestion for you. If you're going to run a scenario, particularly one that has multiple disciplines, Why don't you start finding stuff on the composite warfare commander concept? And then run your teams by warfare area. There's a reason why we do it that way. And then you just have an Uberführer that resolves the resource allocation problems, because everybody's going to want the same resources for their warfare area. It's reality. Yeah, that's how it works. So but I think you're going to find that Captain's Edition is probably going to scratch that itch. Always got to play with his mic again.
Hey, there we go. Another current events question. Thoughts about the direction the Japanese are going, particularly the Japanese fleet?
Oh, that's Larry's boondoggle.
Well, I wouldn't call it a boondoggle. I mean, yeah, the Japanese are building up. Everything that I'm seeing them do is testing the boundaries of their constitution, because they're limited to their own maritime, their own self-defense. That's cool. You want to be able to do that. And they've got this really big neighbor, China, that can bully them anytime it wants. And then you've got this crazy guy to the north who, they're not sure what's going on. And even China's like, just sit down and shut up, Kim. Okay. So they've got serious threats that they've got to deal with. And most of their efforts seems to be going into ballistic missile defense. I think the opposition to the Aegis ashore thing was simply too much for them to handle. And now they're talking about building 2 ballistic missile defense ships. I'm not sure if you call them missile. Sorry, go ahead, John.
20,000 ton. They're like 20,000 ton ships, right? They're the ones that they're discussing.
Yeah, they're going to be the size of the Izumo class, and realistically, they may even go with that hull and just fill it with missile cells. I mean, we saw a proposal by by Hunton to Ingalls Industries to take a San Antonio hull and turn it into a similar type of ship. Mm-hmm. And it was featured in the SITREP because it was just so unique and not a bad concept. It had very little in the way of self-defense against ASW or surface threats. You could park this thing off somebody's shore and it would do a very good job of defending against any incoming ballistic missiles. And, not that I'm trying to plug my own stuff, but if you read Shattered Trident, we put a lot in that. Chris and I put a lot into that book about missile strikes from Korea on Japan. And that's Korea. If China was doing the shooting, the threat would be multiplied, 5-fold or even more. So they don't want to get missiles on their territory, strangely enough. And that's where I see them putting most of their effort at this point.
This is BMD defense they could deploy on either vector, sort of toward China or toward North Korea, without doubling the investment they need to have for an ashore facility.
Well, the key word in what you said, Jocko, is investment. The Aegis Ashore would have been much cheaper. The
I imagine to
downside.
operate.
I'm sorry.
I imagine to both build and operate it would be cheaper.
Yeah,
We kind of ran
lifetime.
into that with our BMD cruises in the Med. We've discovered just how expensive that is and how much wear and tear occur on our cruisers.
Yeah, and operationally, the downside is they're fixed points, so they can be attacked more easily. And ships at sea, if you want a BMD in a particular area, then that ship is locked into steam and racetracks. That makes it a more of a target, as is shown in the book and is shown in real life when the Moskva, was attacked because she had to stay in roughly the same spot, and she ended up being too predictable. And there's also the higher operational cost, and if she shoots off her missiles, she has to go back into reload, and now she's off station. A land-based facility would have facilities to reload, or hopefully stocks of reload missiles nearby, so that doesn't become an issue. It's a trade-off, and it is more expensive. I mean, I don't know what the trade-off is going to be in terms of cost. Chris did some rough calculations on that a long time ago. I don't remember what the relationship was.
Life cycle cost would be like a factor 3 to 4 higher.
Is it that high? Wow.
Yeah, because it's the maintenance on the ship, and the fact that you have to have people who will take care of the propulsion plant. Aegis ashore, you just have to worry about the guys running the Aegis system and the missile cells. Once you take a ship, there's a whole bunch of supporting cast members you gotta have. Keep the lights on.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing you have to worry about with Aegis ashore, in Japan anyway, earthquakes.
Oh,
they've got issues there, and they're going to have to. It's a fairly robust system. I think they could handle a minor jolt, but let's be real, they get some pretty big hits over there.
So a crazy question then: would there be a possibility to have some sort of mobile Aegis ashore? And the Army was looking at doing SM-6s on land, right?
Yeah. The problem is the Army has to be tied into Aegis ashore. The radar itself is just not going to work.
That's not mobile.
And I got news
I'd like
for you.
to watch that.
If you think the Navy's going to let the Army have SM-6s when we can barely get enough to put 6 or 7 on our ships, good luck.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Well, you're welcome. I mean, whatever we know is going to go into Japan's self-defense force booklet, which Peter has already started work on, and he's made progress on. We'll get Commonwealth Navies out the door, and then that'll be. I mean, we've got multiple pipelines going. We've always got an annex book, series book, in final development, and then we've got, in addition to and Japan, people are working actively on Latin America, North, maybe, we should have NATO because of the Finns, NATO South, and Chris, France. Don't want to forget France. There's a
Well, I get last thing about Japan is they've been developing a lot of their own like anti-shipping missiles. They've got a pretty good anti-shipping missile they just developed recently. What are your thoughts about them doing some sort of like kind of playing China's game and going into the ballistic anti-ship missile business, or anyone else for that matter, or even us?
We're still waiting on to see whether or not Russia's done it. They keep saying, "Oh yeah, we've done it," and it's like you haven't shown any capability. Particularly with this the Kinzhal. So far, every target that the modified MiG-31s have gone against are land-based. They have never displayed the ability to attack a ship. So we get down to the problem of targeting, and Russia does not have a good targeting infrastructure right now. The only one who really has been working it is China. And I'm one of those people who say I don't see a robust infrastructure for them to be really able to target like the DF-26. I think that is a Guam attack missile largely with an anti-ship secondary function if and when they finally get an ability to target it, because satellites don't work very well. You have to make your choice between a wide area search or a narrow area search, and they don't have enough birds to have, a wide area search followed up with a narrow. So it's really kind of tough. And that's why we've only recently started seeing tests, because it's hard.
Got it. How about the use of GPS weapons as anti-shipping weapons at this point?
Great to get it where it was.
GPS can only attack a fixed target. I'm working on an article right now for the Naval Sitrep that talks about it. There have been, most missiles are dedicated either to attacking a fixed land target and getting it precisely as possible, or attacking a moving target, which means getting it into the area where you think it will be, and then a terminal seeker carries it the rest of the way. That is mandatory for a ship at sea. You need something that says, okay, here I am, and now I'm searching, and I go in. Even with a fixed target, the initial inertial systems that the Russians fielded in the 50s and we fielded in the 60s, Chris, first gens, they would have a drift of, I think I put one nautical mile per hour, which means
it's actually more than that.
Is it more? What do you think it would be, Chris?
Well, the first ones, when your CEP is measured in multiple tens of kilometers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking, the first gen, an M1. What would you give as a CEP, Chris?
4 or 5 kilometers.
Yeah, which is like 2 miles. So even with a nuke, that's not really considered accurate.
But as a quick follow-up, hasn't the Air Force recently demonstrated anti-shipping capability with JDAMs? There were some tests.
Well, no, they're working on it. It's that quick sync type thing that they're talking about. The problem is, what they're trying to work with JDAM is they're trying to put in a data link so they can tell it where to go. And my response is, and you expect an aircraft to exist in a hostile air defense environment to guide that in. It's the same problem I had with the Maritime Strike Tomahawk initially. It was aircraft directed. You put that in an HQ-9 environment, it won't survive.
It's like a permissive environment weapon.
Yeah, it's really what it ends up being.
In that sense, it's no different than a bullpup. Somebody has to be there and on the joystick, steering it all the way in as the ship zigs and zags and maneuvers, and is shooting at you actively. So it's a non-starter in my opinion.
If they put a terminal homer on it, like a millimeter wave radar, I can see that being a useful function. Right now, all they're saying is if we can hit them, we'll hit them with the force of a torpedo. It's if we can hit part I'm having issue with.
Yeah.
And as a quick addendum to that, how about I think the Australians have got their JDAM ERs that we've been putting on mine kits. Any thoughts on those?
It's kind of a neat idea, but if you're trying to build a minefield with missiles, boy, howdy, is that expensive.
It would be, yeah.
Of course you will.
Thanks, because it told me you don't have permission to speak.
You have to raise your hand, Tom.
Oh,
It's by that
yeah.
little
You
frog.
know what? I just here to listen because I even forget that there is this chat and I'm kind of busy and I don't really have any questions. I must admit, nothing came. Ugh. No. If you have any questions to me, because I need to get back to the flowcharts and other stuff and the page, but there's so much on my head right now. My question is what if any flowchart or play aid would be helpful that I didn't think about. That would be great for me to know.
Well, Tom, you've done a great job of coming up with some graphic aids already.
I know, but I want to do more. Yeah, I didn't finish it, and I need to. Well, I didn't finish it because I had some questions about sonobuoys that I can't remember what my question was. But reading through sonobuoys, I need to read it again because, as I said, other things on my head. Right, this is just a hobby, and one of many. But I remember I have some problems with sonobuoy barriers that I was not certain how to perform them. Damn it. I will look at it. Give me a second. I will find the email I sent already. And yeah,
While
because
Tom is, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Oh, he's running away.
Okay, and while Tom is doing that, I should plug one of the books that we're reviewing in the syrup. It's called, strangely enough, Airborne ASW. It's by a guy named Glenn, and he's an operator, a senior one. And he is giving you basically a manual on how to conduct airborne ASW, and not just basics. He talks about narrowband analysis, how to manage the crew in your aircraft, search patterns. It's really, if you want to learn anything about ASW, I wish I had it when I was an ASW officer of the fleet. Publisher. I don't have my copy handy. It's on Amazon. That's where I found it.
Oh, hang on.
which button? Tell me which button. No,
It's frontline books, Peter. It's frontline books, and it's a nice overall discussion. Basically, what he's telling you is finding submarines with sonobuoys is bloody hard, and that the localization patterns tend to be more problematic than what I've got right now because I went simple on localization. That is really the big. Once you detect finding out exactly where he is so you can drop a torpedo on him is really hard.
Yeah.
Let me put to you this way, Peter. I've got some of the Navy War College engagement analyses, and the when you get down to the final weapon system effectiveness, which means everything up to hitting and sinking the submarine, an ASW torpedo from an aircraft has less than a 25% chance of succeeding.
Yeah. Are there any data? Because I can't remember if there were any conflict where ASW, airborne ASW, was used enough to get data from it, or were there any conflict? Because Falklands shown that finding submarine in shallow waters that is pretty much impossible, right?
They're NATO sonobuoys don't do well in shallow water. Russian sonobuoys do better, but that's kind of a relative term. The big thing that we went down, to be quite honest, Tom, was explosive echo ranging for shallow water. Because what we're doing, and by the way, we copied the Russians. Because they had explosive echo ranging long ago, is that explosions are broadband pulses. They're not narrow. It's not like 12 or 20 kilohertz going out. They're a packet, and you're trying to process like 1,000 hertz worth of returns because you're looking for that one frequency where reverberation really doesn't bother it as much as the others. It's that sensitive.
Yeah, I was more if there because other than exercises, were there any conflict where airborne ASW played enough part to have meaningful data about their performance? Because I can't remember any conflict where aircraft or helicopter would sunk a sub.
World War II.
Aside from that, but after World War II, II I know, but the technology differed much from
in terms of detection and localization. There's been a lot in the Cold War era that leads you. For example, I can give you a search pattern against a Type 1 nuke, and the buoys are like 15 miles apart.
Ooh. Okay.
Because a November, it's a concrete mixer out in the water. Because we started in the 1950s, we woke up to this idea of narrowband. And that's where Project Jezebel got started. And it wasn't sonobuoys, it was SOSUS. And we laid a trial array in 1952, if I remember correctly. Found out that, oh, hey, this works. And then we started not only deploying the land-based stuff, but Project Jezebel expanded into the LOFAR buoy, and that started in 1954. I've got some really good history on LOFAR sonobuoy development. And yeah, they were, when you look at a Type 1 nuke, a November Echo or Hotel, what we used to call the hens, it is not outside the realm of possibility of getting 100 to 200 mile detections.
Oh,
direct path, LOFAR.
Wow, that's more than I expected. With single one? or with the
single buoy, but that just means remember, these are all omni, so you have to lay a humongous pattern to kind of get a feeling for where this guy is. And at the time, they can only listen to 4 buoys at a time. So that's why narrowband was really dependent upon a SOSIS detection to give you a probability area, and you drop the pattern in the probability area.
Yeah, and then I think you mentioned, and then they pinpointed it with med. Many times.
The last couple of passes were with MAD because the seeker size for like a Mark 43 or Mark 44 is very small.
Yeah,
So
because I'm asking because I read recently that apparently the new Seahawk will be without med. The new update in some press I've seen that the newest Seahawk version will be without med altogether, and I was wondering if this is because the sonars are better or sonobuoys are better, or will there be just guided by something else like shipborne sonars?
Okay, that's why in the rules I don't require you to have to use MAD. It's one of them. If you've got directional active buoys, that will do the same thing.
Okay.
And a lot of the diecast buoys now. The nice thing is the new buoys also tell you where they are.
Oh, right.
Which is a huge benefit. Because before you just kind of had to guess.
Right. This is the GPS modifier, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, and all of them have GPSs right now. This is like standard feature of the newest.
It's becoming standard feature. Yes.
Nice.
And they're also going with these instead of explosive echo ranging, they're going with the electronic sound source, the ADARs, and those can get you a really good pattern as well.
Okay. I'm trying to find my question about sonobuoy rules that prevented me from applying this ASW flowcharts. And
well, if you don't find it, don't worry about it. If you find it later on, just resend it and I'll take a look at it.
I will. Sure, because I remember I had there was something.
I suspect your question is in how the hell do I process a buoy field, not a buoy.
No, that I think wasn't a problem. Something else was, because field. I understood that you basically a field is area in which you roll for the chance you have, right? Like for a normal sonar, you just roll for it, but it might have just an area that is created.
That's why I went down and used it by line.
Right.
So because your sonar fields are usually deployed in line formations. And that just was the way. Now you can resolve each individual sonobuoy if you are so inclined.
Yeah, we tried that with H4.1. No, thank you. I mean,
painful. No. Thank you. I understand.
I think we somehow. I think I tried once, but I remember in H4 when we calculated chances, the chances of the DIFARs were much too high, if I remember correctly, to detect anything and pinpoint. I remember that the Nox versus Victor scenario ended very quickly.
Well, if it's a Victor 2, that's
I believe it was.
Then that's not very inaccurate. Victor 2s are not that much quieter than a hotel or a neck or a November.
But I remember, good thing you did extended or expanded TMA rules, because the detection was one thing, because they of course were detected by the towed array, but they were pinpointed very quickly and prosecuted very quickly by SC Sprite. And right now we played it again with the new solution rules, and it worked really, really nice. Actually, with you remember, Peter, we played it with live, where basically by a very small margin, Victor and Nox killed each other. Because they launched torpedoes at pretty much the same time. Yeah, Victor fired at the outside its range. It was fun. I think we skewed it a little so that no one was. Everyone had good time, but it worked much better than previously, I think.
Well, when you figure out what your question is, just resend it, and I'll take a look at it.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Well, yeah, you got Chris has his hand up, and Jocko just put his up. He did raise his hand.
Yeah, just wanted summation roadmap. So it sounds like we've got Commonwealth and Captain's Edition. Are those the things in the pipeline at this point?
Clear the coast for Command at Sea, small boys. That's up. Then Commonwealth, and then Captain's Edition in Japan are what are the things. But somewhere in there, Larry and I do need to finish up World War One.
I'm actively looking at that. We haven't come out with a Fear God Dreadnought product for a while, and we've got 4 different games within the same system that we're trying to support. So yeah, I've been looking at that too. We'll talk offline and to see what the schedule is. But roadmap is really not the right word. I mean, this is not GPS. This is not a map put it on paper. This is directions scrawled on a napkin that your friend phoned to you over the phone.
Brownie in motion.
No, I mean I don't even know what I'm having for lunch tomorrow. Okay, but I do know that we're close on the coast. We're closer. That's the thing we're closest on, and we are not quite as close on Commonwealth navies, and we're less close on high tide. We're publishing. We're of course the thing in front of all that is the Naval Sit Rep, which we will get out in this month, if at all humanly possible. And then those 3 products after that, and we're going to keep mixing it up. If we can do more sessions like this with Peter and talk about what comes later, but we got to figure that out ourselves.
No, right now the big thing is I call it the also-rans. It's the navies that really didn't get involved or involved much that have not been in Fear God, the American Navy, the Japanese, maybe some of the Scandinavians that aren't in there. Those are the ones that we need to fill in. One of our designers has some ideas for pre-World War I supplements, but right now they're nothing more but an idea.
There were wars that happened. There were conflicts that happened in that 1905 through 1925 era, but they're very small. They can almost be handled in a silver particle. we simply don't have the resources or editorial resources, i.e. bodies, to go out and research those conflicts and assemble the scenarios. We're open to submissions from folks, and if we get a chance and some designer comes up with a bright idea, we'll let them run with it.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. It's been very worthwhile. We listen to what you guys say, and we'll try and keep moving forward.
Peter, if we want to try and do it like quarterly, that might be workable.
That works for me. Thanks much, everyone. Bye-bye.